In this week's episode, I'm joined by Lisa Koenecke, author of Inclusion Ally, and we'll be talking about the state of Maryland's new transgender inclusion policy, an amazing new franchise's efforts to diversify its franchisees, and much more. Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I've found is that there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data. But there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for DEI stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these inclusive actions and policies within your own organization to help you build a more inclusive world. Let's get started. Lisa, will you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me, Bernadette. A big shout out to Jess Pettit for introducing the two of us. So for those of you, if you're listening locally, this is a Wisconsin accent. I know Bernadette is in the Chicago, Illinois area, but if you're listening somewhere else, this is what a Wisconsin accent is. I was a middle and a high school counselor for 12 years and a professor training the next generation of school counselors. And I wanted to take that a bit deeper. And so I have my DEI certification from Cornell. I've done a TED Talk, written a book, and have been presenting in all 50 states internationally on DEI issues. My business is called Inclusion Ally. And I work with leaders who want to create safe and I haven't figured out the rest of that yet. Safe climates is probably where it is, both physically and psychologically. So still working on that tagline.
It's great, Lisa. I'm really excited to have you here today. And I would love to talk a little bit more about your work. So your work is LGBTQ specific.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the industries that you primarily work in and who do you serve?
Yeah, I forgot the gay stuff. So yeah, I'm Lisa K, your everyday gay. So that is my hashtag on things. And when I said that I work with leaders who want to, I work with lots of industries, education number one, and then beyond that, nonprofits, associations, a few corporations here and there. But what I've seen is that usually a big corporation will have their own DEI person or department or something along those lines. So I like working with groups and organizations who don't have that big person. And it is how can you, very similar to your ACR little sheet that you have.
The follow the arc. Okay.
Follow the arc on that is, just ask questions like you say. And, I pick up dog poop just like everybody else does. And, I like to bring humor to it so that the LGBTQ plus population is not seen as taboo. And it's not always, it could be an employee, but it could be a relative of an employee, or it could be your neighbor. So I'm all about bringing that inclusion to that space.
That's fantastic. And can you tell us a little bit about what in your work is bringing you hope?
Oh, the youth of today are bringing me hope. And so I am 54 years old. I know you can't see it, but that in that Gen X population, talking to the people who are making the big decisions right now about what's coming down the road, and that the younger generation, not always younger, but they're like, y'all just need to get this. You need to understand what trans is, and you need to just embrace what pronouns are. And so I am excited about, once we get the little older population up to speed on things, bringing the generations together. Very excited about that.
I love that as well. I mean, isn't it amazing? And the amount of Gen Z folks who are actually out as LGBTQ plus is astonishing. I mean, over 20%. And I always joke that if it was 20% when I came out in the 90s, it would have been a heck of a lot easier to date, right?
Or yeah, and my sister told me that I was gay when I was 27. So there's that too.
Absolutely. It's really inspiring to see them have that courage and then challenge us all, right? I think
It's yeah, exactly.
well, speaking of asking questions, one of the things I wrote about in this week's newsletter was about microaggressions and how they really show up a lot at work, and how I really do believe that it's everyone's responsibility to call folks out on their microaggressions and to speak up as an ally. And I talk about the ARC method. So can you talk a little bit more about how you approach microaggressions and sort of what your take on this is?
Absolutely. And I loved everything that you wrote about this week too. So with the microaggressions, what I do talk about, whether it's implicit bias, unconscious bias, intersectionality, and fill in whatever word you want to use for it, my big thing is safety. And so, what I want to make sure that I'm talking to people is that, yeah, if you want to be a capital A ally, as somebody who is an upstander instead of a bystander, just make sure that it's safe. You don't want to get into a situation where either the person to whom the microaggression is made, I guess, or talked about becomes
Sure.
a target. So you don't want that to happen. So know the time and the place. And sometimes it's difficult, and it's okay. It's okay. Not that, you need my blessing or anything, but that you can revisit that. Hey, I took a moment to think about it, and this just isn't feeling right with me. And, could we revisit this?
I love that. I think that's a great line. Can we revisit this? I think that's because what I think is that a lot of folks don't have those conversation starters, and they need words, they need language, right? So can we revisit this is a great one. One of the things I talk about saying is something like, what did you mean by that?
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit more, right? As a way to sort of prompt the reflection. Okay, so let's get into this week's good vibes. The first story comes from the state of Maryland, which made it much easier for folks who are transgender, residents who are transgender and on Medicaid, to receive gender affirming care, really without too much more difficulty than their existing regulations, which require a year of doctor's care, medical care. So really, I think this is an amazing opportunity for trans folks to really feel like they can be more safe in their state. Talking about safety,
Right, and then move to Maryland. And it's
right?
I'm currently in the process of moving from Wisconsin to South Carolina, and let me tell you, these are the things that I think about as well. And it's interesting, in the 3 years that I've had my business and talking of how the laws have changed, and how it used to be that I talk about LGBT plus 101, and more people are like, teach me about the non-binary, the gender non-conforming, all of this. And it was like, let's bring on the trans information, because again, we're talking about people, we're talking about humans. And as an ally, both you and I have our pronouns in our little window right there. And so with being a cisgender person of privilege, then I'm all about spreading the word, right? And just advocating as much as I can as a capital A ally for our friends who want and need gender affirming care.
Absolutely. And you know what? You and I have a lot of privilege, right? Even though we are LGBTQ plus, I think it's really important to acknowledge that we have lots of privilege simply by being cisgender, by being white. All of those things bring a lot of privilege. Okay, so next story comes from a franchise company called Wetzel's Pretzels, and it has a
Love the
new.
name.
I know, right? It has a new plan to expand access to franchise ownership by providing women and underrepresented folks a discount on their franchise fees, financial assistance, and educational and mentorship opportunities. I love this.
I do too. And I think that for me, it's fascinating because, again, just starting my own business just a few short years ago, I wanted to know who were the LGBTQ plus friendly financial institutions, or what grants were out there. And so I wanted to right away become a business enterprise through the National Gay Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. And then I also wanted to become a woman-owned business. There were a lot of hoops for that. I'm like, wow, here's my card. Anyway, so I think that it's wonderful what Wetzel's Pretzels is doing to expand that, because it's also, it's giving the opportunity, and I think that when you were talking about microaggressions too, it's the let's make the pie bigger. If I have a right, it's not taking a right away from you. So those of you who understood the National Speakers Association reference to making the pie bigger, one right doesn't take away a right from someone else.
Absolutely. And I wish there was an easy way to teach that. I'll have to be honest with you. I haven't really found an easy way to explain that. I mean, it's a metaphor that people can't intellectualize it yet, or that I've been able to experience. So I'm looking for an easy way to teach that if you happen to know one.
I don't know that I do, but it was interesting. I read another article this morning who said, "Dear men who are in power," and I'm talking, it could be trans, could be usually cisgender, heteronormative is what I'm going with there. If you are at an event, go and see who's setting everything up. It's usually those who were assigned female at birth. And so I was like, so when you're asking the question, how do we change this? We need to have our allies who are in power, whether they are male or female or BIPOC or religious, whatever it might be, open up those doors, which is what Wetzel's Pretzels is doing.
Exactly. And this is equity in action. All right. The third story today comes about the backlash to comments made by Candace Owens, who is an anti-diversity activist. So Candace Owens was talking online about the Skims line of adaptive underwear, which is very inclusive. It has a model in a wheelchair. It has adaptive features for those with limited mobility, for those on the autism spectrum. Anyway, so Candace Owens was really mocking these products online, which then caused this whole uproar and backlash against her. And I just, at the end of the day, what I like about this is that there's more awareness about people with disabilities and their needs. And so I'm going to take this as a win.
Yeah, and I love that you focus on the positives to be able to say, here we go. And it's not that I don't know Candace Owens at all. I read everything that I could and such, and it was like, why? Why? What is it doing? How is it hurting you, dear person, that I will say of privilege, right? So you have this microphone, you have this platform on which to speak, and it was like, wow, how interesting. I'll leave it at that. How interesting.
That's exactly right. How interesting. Well, the fourth story comes from the Biden administration, which recently provided $39 billion for semiconductors and chip manufacturers. I don't even think about this stuff. But as part of that, they made a requirement that companies who access this subsidy must build affordable childcare near the site or pay for childcare elsewhere. So this is all about diversifying these industries and getting more women in these industries, making that easier.
Absolutely. And so when I first read that article, it wasn't potato chips. So I had to go, take a step back from that. And then I just wanted to say, yay, Elizabeth Warren, who has been proclaiming this for forever and a day, that we need to. Let's think about this. If we are to take care of our youth and give them what they need, then we don't have to. Let's be proactive, right? Instead of reactive. And again, and this could also benefit men who maybe, are single parents, who are widowers or whatever it might be. But I love this. I think it's wonderful. And let's bring in the 2-year, the 4-year, everything, so that we also have people who can job shadow and be youth apprentice while they are helping to raise our future generations. Dig it.
I love it as well. And honestly, I mean, the cost of childcare in our country it's astronomical, and people have to choose between childcare and going back to work sometimes, because it's sometimes equivalent to a salary or close to it.
Well, and I'll tell you real briefly, that's why I'm moving to South Carolina, to be by my niece so that I can be her nanny, and that she can take the money that she would use in especially infant child care to either get her master's or her certificate or her husband to do that. So yeah, that's why we're moving.
Why do we even have to be
Right.
having these discussions, right? Okay, so the last story is from Google, which has done a really nice job of including its Muslim employees this Ramadan. And as a result, it's also improving its product. So the company Employee Resource Group, which is, I believe it's called Muslims at Google, they put together this comprehensive Ramadan guide that provides non-Muslim Googlers tips on how to support their colleagues. As a result, there are even now Ramadan-themed Google Meets backgrounds, and an improved search experience that provides tips with connecting with Muslim consumers around the joy of the holiday. I love this because it's wins on a lot of levels.
Absolutely. And what I love is that it's coming from those who celebrate rather than me trying to tokenize what is this, or, I'll do my own Google search, but it's coming from the people who actually live this. And as a middle school counselor for so long, I would absolutely, during Ramadan, I would tell our physical education teachers, please don't do the mile run during Ramadan. Can you do something differently? State testing. Let's take a look at this. So, because here are these youth who aren't eating or drinking the entire day. And so I'm excited. I love what you talked about with the backgrounds as well, because it makes it more accessible, right? And that then I can ask questions, which again, I love your model.
Thank you. And honestly, having the backgrounds, I think it normalizes all of this, normalizes cultural celebrations, normalizes different personal backgrounds. And I think that's just a beautiful thing. All right. So, Lisa, thank you so much for being my guest today. Can you tell folks how they can find you?
Absolutely. Bernadette, thanks for having me. So the easiest way to find me is to go to inclusionally.com, inclusionally.com. And then that'll take you to my website, Lisa Koenecke, Koe, and as in Nancy, ECKE. Happy to talk, happy to help however I can. Hey, buy a book. They're not that expensive. That would be wonderful. Let's save some lives. It has a rainbow cover as well.
You have the best energy. So thank you so much for being my guest. This week's call to action is about how Friday is Transgender Day of Visibility. You can learn more about this special day by visiting gendercool.org to meet some amazing transgender youth. These youth are brave and inspiring, and they keep showing up even when their community is under attack. Thank you for listening to 5 Things in 15 Minutes. I hope you found yourself inspired by at least one of this week's stories. If you did, would you mind sharing it with a colleague and leaving us a review on your favorite podcasting platform? And if you don't already get my 5 Things newsletter, join at 5thingsdei.com. I'm Bernadette Smith, and I'll see you next week right here for 5 Things in 15 Minutes, bringing good vibes to DEI.